Hare Krishna. The main article, a summary of a lecture given by Prabhupada, was based on notes taken by Umapati. It has been said that when we wake up and when we go to sleep, we should beat our mind 1,000 times with a shoe. When the mind says things like, why sing Hare Krishna? Why not take LSD? We should beat it with the same shoe. However, if we always think of Krishna, no beating will be necessary. The mind will be our best friend. And there was an article by Hayagriva, Flip Out and Stay. Hayagriva had quoted liberally from Hart Crane and Walt Whitman. No wonder so many young collegiates are trying to flip out permanently on super drugs. Perhaps this is their way of saying, we don't want any part of this hell you made for yourselves. So they use psychedelics as a springboard to propel themselves into different realms. But the drug flip is only temporary. It is temporary because it is artificial. One really begins to wonder where all these trips are leading. Haragriva concluded that Krishna Kirtan is the quickest way to flip out without coming down. Your associates will think you mad. That is the first sign of progress. Just let others be mad for Maya, the old and ephemeral lures of woman and girl. But you be mad instead for the reality. In the back of the magazine was an ad for Swamiji's essay, Krishna the Reservoir of Pleasure and Who is Crazy, and the notice. So in the main article, there's a summary of a lecture by Prabhupada, which was based off of the notes of Umapati. And Prabhupada was saying that we should beat our mind 1,000 times with the shoe when the mind says things like, why sing Hare Krishna? Why not take LSD? Or why not go for material things? We should beat it with the shoe. But with that same mind, if we think about Krishna, then the beating won't be necessary because our mind will be our best friend. And it continues where there's an article by Hayagriva, which is Flip Out and Stay. And Hayagriva quoted from Hart Crane and Walt Whitman by using them as backing up their evidence of saying how these LSD and these drugs are only temporary. But everyone is still trying to find out where the real trips are, which will be forever. And Hayagriva concludes saying that the Krishna Kirtan, Hare Krishna Mahamantra is the quickest way to flip out without coming down. It will be always permanent. And it explains that your associates will think you're mad, but instead you're actually mad for reality. And continuing in the back of the magazine, there's an ad for Prabhupada's essays to be published soon.
Hare Krishna. Soon to be printed, right, Vasudev? Garan? Soon to be printed, Gita Upanishad or Bhagavad Gita as it is. I heard that Gita Upanishad was not a book, it is compiled from, anyway, some magazine or something. Let's see what it comes. Translated and with commentaries by Swami Bhaktivedanta. Prabhupada's first and main instruction to his editors had been that they should produce the magazine regularly, every month, even if they don't know how to sell the copies, or even if they only turned out 2 pages, they had to continue bearing the standard. That's interesting because nowadays it's bi-monthly, and some of you are getting, right? How many of you get? Some of you are getting?
Yes, Prabhu, we are getting.
Prasanth, you are getting? No?
I just joined Prabhu. I'm trying to follow. I don't know the whole thing.
And now I will schedule arrange. No, the BTG Back to God magazine. Okay. So he called Hayagriva to his room and presented him a complete 3-volume set of his Srimad Bhagavatam. On the front page of each volume, he had written, to Sriman Hayagriva Das, Brahmachari, with my blessings, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami. Hayagriva was grateful and mentioned that he had not been able to afford them. That's all right. Prabhupada said, now you compile this back to Godhead. Work sincerely and make it as big as the Time magazine. Oh, wow. Prabhupada wanted all his disciples to take part in it. Don't be dull, he said. Write something. He wanted to give his disciples back to Godhead for their own preaching. Brahmananda and Gargmuni took the first issues out the same night on bicycles, riding to every head shop on the Lower East Side, all the way to 14th Street and as far west as the West Village, until they distributed all 100 issues. This is an increase in the preaching. Now all these students could take part in the work, typing, editing, writing, assembling, selling. It was his preaching. Of course, but he wasn't alone anymore. Over a short 4 months, the society has expanded sufficiently to warrant larger quarters than the small Second Avenue storefront temple. I'll read that again. Over a short 4 months, the society has expanded sufficiently to warrant larger quarters than the small Second Avenue storefront temple. Stated the editorial in the second issue of Back to Godhead. Prabhupada had not abandoned his idea for a big building in New York City. Greenwich Village real estate was too expensive and Midtown was out of the question. But Prabhupada still said he wanted to buy a building. It was difficult for his followers to think of Krishna consciousness as anything more than a Lower East Side movement, because who but the people of the Lower East Side would be interested in Krishna consciousness? And anyway, who had money to buy a building in Manhattan? But one day, Ravindra Swarup had happened to meet someone, a wealthy Jewish heir who was sympathetic towards youth movement, who agreed to loan Swamiji $5,000. Ravindra Swarup had arranged the loan and Swamiji had designated the money as his building fund, to which he had regularly added another $5,000, gradually added another $5,000 that he had collected through incidental donations, but with suitable buildings starting at $100,000. Even this sum seemed petty. What a great news, huh? So Prabhupada wanted that this engagement. He wanted that Back to Godhead magazine should be printed. So he called Hagrid and instructed him, and he also gave a copy of Srimad Bhagavatam, with signing hand signature as what do you call what do you call that? When the author signs it, book signing anyway. So he signed and gave him. So Hagrid was happy, and he said that magazine must come out every month. And he engaged everybody, typing, editing, writing, assembling, and selling. They all went and sold. It's very nice. Now, with this, if the congregation has increased, storefront is no more suitable because it needs the bigger space. Prabhupada never gave up. He still wants to buy a big building. So Ravindra Swarup arranged a Jewish person who can what do you call lend $5,000. Prabhupada also had some other duke by this time. He saved $5,000. See, Prabhupada was saving all this money, whatever small amount, was very careful in spending. Even the big feast and everything. Anyway, so $10,000 at least he arranged now. So the building would cost at least $100,000. So it's moving. It's a good move. AJ? You can read. Oh, you can read. Okay. Second, you please read.
Hare Krishna. Swamiji went with Brahmananda to look at a building on 6th Street that had previously been the Jewish Providential Bank. It had a large lobby with a mezzanine, marble floors, and the atmosphere of a temple. Brahmananda suggested that the vault area could be remodeled for use as a dormitory and Swamiji considered the mezzanine for his own apartment. The large lobby, he said, could be used for kirtanas and lectures. On leaving the building, however, Prabhupada noted that it was located on the corner by a bus stop. It would not be a good location. The Gaudiya Math branch at Bagh Bazar in Calcutta, he said, was also located at a bus stop, and the noisy engines of the buses as they started up created a disturbance. Prabhupada next looked at the temple Emmanuel, also on the 6th Street on the Lower East Side. It was even larger than the bank building. And when some of the Swamiji's disciples walked through the cavernous empty rooms, they became bewildered to think how, even if they could get such a place, they would be able to manage or use it. He visited other places, one so neglected and in such poor repair that it looked as though it had been vandalized, and another in similar condition filled with lumber stacked almost to the ceiling. He asked Rupanuga, who had accompanied him, what he thought. And Rupanuga said, too much time and money to fix it up. So they left. Swamiji returned to his room and went into the bathroom, where he washed his feet in the tub. He said that it was an Indian custom that after walking outside, you must wash your feet. So here, Prabhupada went with Brahmananda to look at buildings for buying a temple. So first they went to the Jewish Providential Bank. It was a bank. It was very neat, large lobby, mezzanine, like with marble floors. And they were deciding basically which place could be the dormitory, or which could be Prabhupada's apartment, and where we would have all the kirtans and lectures. And then when they come out, Prabhupada saw that it was on a corner near a bus stop, and he said it wouldn't be a good location because Gaudiya Math was also in a similar location at Bagh Bazar, and it was always creating a disturbance because of the noises coming from the buses and everything. Then they went to another temple on East Street, where it was bigger than that building, and when Prabhupada's disciples entered, they were not sure how they could afford such a place or how they will be able to manage it. And they went to some other places which were not in good condition. They had been they needed repair, and when he asked Rupanuga how it is, he said that it is going to take too much time and money to fix it up, and so they left. And Prabhupada always washes his feet when he comes from outside, and he said that it was a custom that you wash your feet to Rupanuga.
Prasanthi?
The devotees met Mr. Price, an elegantly dressed real estate agent. You have a handful of stars, Mr. Price told Brahmananda. You are incorporated as a tax-free religious organization. You have no idea how much money this will save. So many people have to vacate just because they cannot pay their taxes. But someone up there is looking after you people, and I have just the place for you and your Swami. Mr. Price showed Brahmananda a handsome three-story building near St. Mark's Place. It was a good downtown location near the young people, yet in an area where the uptown people would feel safe. The floors were polished hardwood, all the doors were ornately hand carved, and it had a large hall suitable for a temple. The Marquis de Lafayette had stayed here during his visit in 1824, a fact that added to the building's charm and prestige. One evening, Mr. Price visited Prabhupada up in his room. Prabhupada sitting on the floor behind his desk and Mr. Price sitting on a metal folding chair. Mr. Price wore an elegant suit and a white dress shirt with cufflinks and starched cuffs. His expensive dress, meticulously tanned face, and blond hair, which some devotees thought was a wig, contrasted strangely with the Swami's simplicity. Mr. Price kept referring to Swamiji as Your Excellency, and he expressed much appreciation of Swamiji's work. He spoke optimistically about how, through his connections, he hoped to save Prabhupada a lot of money and trouble and get him just the place he wanted. Accompanied by a few disciples, Prabhupada went with Mr. Price to see the building. While Mr. Price, the devotees, and the custodian of the house were all talking together in a group. Prabhupada wandered off unnoticed to a corner of the room where there was an old-fashioned sewing machine. He began pressing the treadle and examining the workings of the machine. As Prabhupada rejoined the group, Mr. Price said, "If you can just get $5,000 down, I can get the owners to draw up a contract. $5,000 down and another 5,000 within 2 months. That shouldn't be difficult." Prabhupada liked the building and told Brahmananda they should purchase it. The devotees met. Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
The devotees met Mr. Price, who is a real estate agent, and he was talking about places where the religious organizations are tax-free, and he was also explaining them where people have to vacate places because there are more taxes which they cannot afford. So he will show them a place which is right for them, and he showed a 3-story building near St. Mark's Place. It is a good downtown location, and the floors were polished with hardwood, and there was a large hall suitable for the temple. And Marcus D. Lafayette had stayed in that place in 1824, which added to the building's charm. And one evening, Mr. Price visited Prabhupada in his room, and it explains about the contrast, about the simplicity of the Swami, and the elegant suit that Mr. Price wore, that devotees examined the contrast between both of them. And Mr. Price used to refer Swamiji as Your Excellency, um, as a respect. And then he I think genuinely wanted to help Prabhupada to save money and to get the place he wanted. So he finally showed the building. Accompanied by few disciples, Prabhupada went with Mr. Price to see the building, and they liked the place. There was a old sewing machine also over there, and Mr. Price explained that they had to give a down payment of 5,000, and after that 5,000 more in 2 months. And Prabhupada liked it and told Brahmananda to they will purchase it.
Wonderful, wonderful. Okay. Vijayanantu.
Brahmananda was inclined to turn the money over right away, but Prabhupada said that a first suitable contract had to be drawn up. Mr. Price talked to the devotees in private, speaking in the Swami's interest and in the interest of the spiritual movement. And he seemed to be promising them something even more than a contract. Perhaps he would have given them the building. It did not make sense that he could give the building, but he told them something like that. He wanted the devotees to think of him as their friend, and he invited them over to his house one evening. When the devotees gathered in his house, sitting stiffly on chairs in his living room, which was lined with bookcases filled not with books, but with two-dimensional designs depicting row of books, he continued to flatter them. He praised Hayagriva's writings, and Hayagriva was obviously embarrassed and flattered. He praised everything about the devotees. He also spoke of how his dog had recently died and said, The house seems empty without the little fellow. He was an unusual man, effeminate and full of flattery and praises. Prabhupada remained reserved after his first meeting with Mr. Price, though he was interested in getting the building if the proper arrangement could be made. Brahmananda continued to negotiate with Mr. Price, and soon, according to Mr. Price, the owners of the building would be expecting the devotees to give proof of their ability to meet the payments. On Prabhupada's direction, the devotees hired a lawyer to go over the contract. This Mr. Price is causing us so much pain, Prabhupada said. What is the difficulty? He did not see the necessary for Mr. Price at all. Why don't we purchase directly from the owners? Why all these agents? It's just the way it's done here, Brahmananda said. So it starts with after seeing the building which Mr. Price had shown to the Prabhupada and the devotees. Brahmananda was very much inclined and interested to give the money or right away, but Prabhupada insisted that first they should get a suitable contract that should be drawn. And Mr. Price talked the devotees in private and speaking them the Swami's interest and the interest of the spiritual movement. And he was promising that something more than a contract he can help, and he wanted the devotees to think that Price is their friend, and he invited all the devotees to his house on one evening. And when the devotees gathered in the house, he started there was a there was a lot of bookcases which was not filled with books. And as soon as the devotees went there, he started to flatter them, and he praised Hayagriva's writings, and which made Hayagriva embarrassed and flattered. But he started to praise all the devotees, and he mentioned about his dog which has died. But so basically in his house, he was keep on giving lot of prizes and doing flattery. But Prabhupada was remained reserved at the first meeting with Price, and he was interested in getting the proper arrangement to be made for the procurement of the building. And Brahmananda, he was doing a lot of negotiation with Mr. Price. And Mr. Price conveyed that the building owners are expecting the devotees to give the ability to make the payments. And on Prabhupada's direction, the devotees hired a lawyer to go over the contract. But Prabhupada felt that Mr. Price was causing so much pain, and he was questioning what is the need to go for a middle person like Mr. Price, and why don't we purchase it from the owners directly? And for this, Brahmananda replied that it is the way things are being done here.
Thank you. Brother Spook, please read.
Guruji. Hare Krishna. Jai Srila Prabhupada. Alan Kalman was a record producer. He had read the article in the East Village about the Swami from India. And when he had read the Hare Krishna mantra on the front page, he had become attracted. The article gave the idea that one could get a tremendous high or ecstasy from chanting. The Swami's Second Avenue address was given in the article. So one night in November, Alan and his wife visited the storefront. Alan. There were about 30 pairs of shoes in the back of the room, people in the front and shoes in the back. We took off our shoes and sat down. Everyone was seated and very quiet. Front and center was a chair, and everyone was staring at this chair. Even then, we felt a certain energy in the room. No one was saying anything, and everyone was staring at the chair. The next thing was our first sight of the Swami. He came in and sat down on the chair, and there was a tremendous surge of energy. the Swami began chanting, and it was a very beautiful sound. Swamiji had this little drum he was hitting, very penetrating and exciting. One of the devotees was holding up a sign with the chant written on it so everyone could follow. Then the devotees got up and danced in a circle, a special dance with steps to it. Swami was looking around the room and he seemed to smile as he looked at you as if to encourage you to join. The next day, Alan phoned Prabhupada to propose that he make a record of the chanting. But it was Brahmananda who answered the phone and he gave Alan an appointment with the Swami that evening. So again, Alan and his wife went down to the East Village, which to them was the neighborhood where things were happening. If you wanted to have some excitement, you went down to the East Village. When they entered the Swami's room, he was seated at his typewriter working. As soon as Alan mentioned his idea about making a record, Prabhupada was interested. Yes, he said, we must record. If it will help us distribute the chanting of Hare Krishna, then it is our duty. They scheduled the recording for 2 weeks later in December at the Adelphi Recording Studio near Times Square. Helen's wife was impressed by how enthusiastically the Swami had gotten to the point of making the record. He had so much energy and ambition in his plans. So here, Prabhupada is in the storefront, and there was an article named as the East Village Other about Srila Prabhupada, about the Hare Krishna Mahamantra in the front page, and Prabhupada's address was given in the article. So Alan and his wife visited the storefront. Alan describes how the storefront was, there was a chair in the center and everyone was looking towards that chair. And as soon as Srila Prabhupada came and started chanting, everything was very beautiful. Alan appreciated it. He felt it is a very exciting and penetrating voice of the drum, and everyone was chanting and then dancing in circle, a special Swami dance, Swami step, a special dance. So that's how it was. Very Alan was very much impressed. His wife was also very much impressed. And then later on, the next day, Alan wanted to meet Srila Prabhupada and propose him a recording program. And that's where Prabhupada agreed to it. And Alan's wife was impressed also that Srila Prabhupada had, very high energy and ambitions in his plans. So Srila Prabhupada's desire and compassion to take the holy name throughout the world is reflected through this pastime. Thank you. Hare Krishna. Prabhuji, you are on mute. Krishna Kirtan Prabhu.
I'm sorry. Okay, thank you.
It was the night before the recording date. A boy walked into the storefront for the evening kirtan carrying a large two-headed Indian drum. This was not unusual, as guests often brought drums, flutes, and other instruments. Yet
This time.
this time Swamiji seemed particularly interested. The boy sat down and was preparing to play when Prabhupada motioned for the boy to bring him the drum. The boy did not move. He wanted to play it himself. But Brahmanand went over and said, Swamiji wants to play the drum. So the boy gave him. Brahmanand, Swamiji began to play and his hands were just dancing on the drum. Everyone was stunned and Swamiji knew how to do this. All we had seen was the bongo drum. So I thought it was the proper Indian drum. But when this two-headed drum came out of nowhere and Swamiji started playing it like a master musician, it created an ecstasy 100 times more than the bongo drum had. After the kirtan, Prabhupada asked the boy if he could borrow the drum for the recording session the next night. The boy at first was reluctant, but the devotees promised to return his drum the next day. So he agreed and said he would bring the drum the next evening. When he left the storefront that night with his drum under his arm, the devotees thought they would never see the boy or his drum again. But the next day, a few hours before Swamiji was to leave for the studio, the boy returned with his drum.
So it's interesting. The boy comes. I don't think it's a regular mridanga. It's a drum in Indian style. So he comes and, but looks like he was very, possessive. Looks the way it happens. Appears that he's very possessive. Prabhupada asked, he didn't want to give, but somehow Brahmanand managed to get it for him. And everyone was amazed to see Prabhupada. Prabhupada knows many things. He's playing drum, amazed everyone. So Prabhupada asked, okay, can you borrow for the recording? And he seems was agitated, but somehow he came. That's a good thing. The new drum story will come. Okay, second book, please read.
It was a cold December night. The Swami, dressed in his usual saffron dhoti, a tweed overcoat, and a pair of grey shoes, which had long since replaced his original white pointy rubber ones, got into Rupanuga's Volkswagen van with about 15 of his followers and their instruments and started for the recording studio. Brahmananda, we didn't start recording right away because there was a group ahead of us. So we went out for a walk in Times Square. We were just standing there with Swamiji, seeing all the flashing lights and all the sense gratification, when a woman came up to Swamiji and said, "Oh, hello, where do you come from?" in a very loud, matronly way. And Swamiji said, "I am a monk from India." And she said, "Oh, that's wonderful, glad to meet you." And then she took Swamiji's hand and left. At the studio, everyone accepted the devotees as a regular music group. One of the rock musicians asked them what the name of their group was, and Hayagriva laughed and replied, "The Hare Krishna chanters." Of course, most of the devotees weren't actually musicians, and yet the instruments they brought with them, a tambura, a large harmonium, loaned by Allen Ginsberg, and rhythm instruments, were ones they had played during kirtanas for months. So as they entered the studio, they felt confident that they could produce their own sound. They just followed their Swami. He knew how to play, and they knew how to follow him. They weren't just another music group. It was music, but it was also chanting, meditation, worship. Prabhupada sat on a mat in the center of the studio while the engineers arranged the microphones and assigned each devotee a place to sit according to his particular instrument. They asked for only 2 pairs of kartals and they approved of the pairs of rhythm sticks. But they wanted several devotees clapping their hands. Rupanuga's usual instrument was a pair of brass Indian bells with the tongues removed. And when the engineer saw them, he came over and said, "Let me hear that." Rupanuga played them and they passed. Since Ravindra Swarupa would be playing the drone on the harmonium, he sat apart with his own microphone, and Kirtananda also had a microphone for the tambura. So here, Prabhupada and 15 devotees, they go to the studio for the recording of the Hare Krishna chanting, and they go in the Rupanuga's Volkswagen van. They were not able, Brahmananda says that they were not able to start the recording right away because there was another group before them, and they went out for a walk in Times Square where an elderly lady came and spoke with Prabhupada. And at the studio, basically, when they all went back, they were being identified as a different musicians, and they asked what their name of the group was. Hayagriva said it was the Hare Krishna chanters, and they had brought in, they were not musicians, but they brought in multiple instruments. They had a tambura, a large harmonium, and kartals. So one of the persons in the studio, they came and have them sit and basically arrange the mics in such a way that some of the devotees who were having instruments like either harmonium or tambura, they got a microphone, and they wanted more people to clap hands. And Prabhupada was sitting on the center, and basically Rupanuka was, I think, playing with the harmonium, and Kirtananda with the tambura. I think Ravindra Sarupa was on the harmonium.
Sorry?
Yeah, Ravindra Sarupa was going to play the harmonium.
Yeah. These are the initial days. Kirtans are very, very sweet. Prasanthi, please read.
And when the engineers were satisfied, they cued the devotees, and Swamiji began chanting and playing his drum. The cymbals and sticks and clapping hands joined him, and the chanting went on steadily for about 10 minutes until an engineer came out of the glass studio and stopped them. Brahmananda was clapping too loudly, creating an imbalance. The engineer went back into his studio, put on his headphones, balanced everyone, and cued them for the second take. This time it was better. The first sound was the tambura with his plucked, reverberating twang. An instant later, Swamiji began beating the drum and singing Vandeham Sri Guru. Then the whole ensemble put out to sea. The tambura, the harmonium, the clackers, the cymbals, Rupanuga's bells, Swamiji's solo singing, pushing off from their moorings out into a fair weather sea of chanting. Lalita Sri Visakan Vitamsascha. Swamiji's voice in the studio was very sweet. His boys were feeling love, not just making a record. There was a feeling of success and union, a crowning evening to all their months later. Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda. After a few minutes of singing prayers alone, Swamiji paused briefly while the instrument continued pulsing and then began the mantra Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. It was pure Bhaktivedanta Swami, expert just like his cooking in the kitchen, like his lectures. The engineer liked what they heard. It would be a good take if nothing went wrong. The instruments were all right. The drum, the singing, the harmony was rough, but this was a special record, a happening. The Hare Krishna chanters were doing their thing, and they were doing it all right. Alan Kellman was excited. There was an authentic sound, maybe it would sell. So when the engineer was satisfied with the arrangement of the devotees and their microphones and where to set up the instruments, he asked them to start chanting and playing, and they all started chanting and playing for about 10 minutes. Then the engineer had to stop them because Brahmananda was clapping too loudly, and it is creating an imbalance. Then they did the second take. This time it was better. The first sound would be tambura. The second thing would be the drum, and then Swamiji would start singing. And they all started to play in harmony. And that day, Swamiji's voice in the studio was very sweet, and the boys were feeling the love, and they were feeling the success of their singing and the union. Um, and it started with Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda. And um, and after a few minutes of the prayers, the mantra started. The Hare Krishna mantra started. And then, Prabhuji, can you go down? So and the singing went very well, and engineer also liked what he heard. So the harmony was good with the singing and the beating of drums, and even Ellen also thought that this record is a genuine record, and maybe this will sell. This sound is authentic. That's what he thought. That's all.
Very nice. Vijan and Prabhu.
After a few rounds of the mantra, the devotees began to feel relaxed, as though they were back in the temple, and they were able to forget about making mistakes on the record. They just chanted, and the beat steadied into the slightly faster pace. The word Hare would come sometimes with a little shout in it, but there were no emotional theatrics in the chorus, just a straight response to the Swami's melody. 10 minutes went by, the chanting went faster, louder, and faster. Swamiji doing more fancy things on the drum until suddenly everything stopped, with the droning note of the harmonium lingering. Alan came out of the studio. It was great, Swami, great. Would you like to just to go right ahead and read the address now, or are you too tired? With polite concern, pale, difficult, Alan Kalman peeped through his thick glasses at the Swami. Swamiji appeared tired. But he replied, "No, I'm not tired." Then the devotee sat back in the studio to watch and listen as Prabhupada read his prepared statement. As explained on the cover of the record album, the sympathetic devotees thought that Swamiji, despite his accent, sounded perfectly clear, reading from his script like an elocutionist. This transcendental vibration by chanting of Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare is the sublime method for reviving our Krishna consciousness. The language was philosophic, and the kind of people who usually walked out of the temple as soon as the kirtanas ended before the Swami would even speak a word, would also not appreciate this speech on their record album. As living spiritual souls, Swamiji preached, "We are all originally Krishna conscious entities, but due to our association with matter from time immemorial, our consciousness is now polluted by material atmosphere." The devotees listened submissively to the words of their spiritual master, while at the same time trying to comprehend the effect this would have on the audience. Certainly, some people would turn it off at the very mention of a spiritual nature. Swamiji continued reading, explaining that the chanting would deliver one from the sensual, the mental, the intellectual planes, and bring one to the spiritual realm. So this describes the recording which was happening. So once the singing prayers are, so after the few rounds of the mantras, the devotees began relax as they were doing the kirtana in the temple. So and they were able to forget like making any mistakes, and they just chanted, and they and followed Prabhupada in a faster pace. And whenever like the word Hare comes, sometimes there will be a little shout on it, and there was no emotional theoretics in the chorus, and they just gave the response to Swami's melodies. And as the time passed by, as like in 10 minutes went by, and chanting went faster, louder, and like much faster, and till everything was suddenly stopped. And Alan, who was recording in his studio, came out and gave a feedback like, "Swami, it was great," and it was like it was great. And he was saying like, "You want to read the address now, or are you tired?" That's what Alan asked. But even though Prabhupada was tired, he mentioned like, "I'm not tired," and So he started reading his prepared statement. So basically, he started his speech, and he was mentioning, like as explained on the cover of the album, this transcendental vibration of chanting the Hare Krishna Mahamantra is the sublime method for reviving the Krishna consciousness. And so his language was philosophic, and people who came out of the temple when the kirtana ended before Swami could even speak a word. So Swami was preaching like we are all spiritual souls and we are all like original Krishna conscious entities, but due to our association with the matter, now our consciousness is polluted by the material atmosphere. And when Swamiji was speaking like this, the devotees like submissively listened to the words of the spiritual master. And so some people would turn off at the mention of the spiritual nature, but Swamiji continued reading, and he explained that the chanting would deliver one from the sensual, the mental, and the intellectual planes, and will bring to a spiritual platform.
Thank you. I'm sure. How many of you heard this recording? Many of you heard about this, right? Prabhupada's recording.
No, Prabhu, I don't think I.
You don't? We have it. It's very famous, actually. Maybe I can hear that. We should have. None of you, brothers, you didn't hear this recording?
Hear anything?
You haven't heard this recording? This one? This transcendental, this is Prabhupada's that this transcendental vibration by chanting of Hare Krishna.
Internet connection is weak, I guess.
Okay, you can't hear. That's okay. Okay. When we have seen it practically, he continued. Even a child can take part in the chanting, or even a dog can take part in it. The Prabhupada's recording is still going on. The chanting should be heard, however, from the lips of a pure devotee of the Lord. And he continued reading on to the end. No other means, therefore, of spiritual realization is as effective.
I'm not able to hear your voice. Are you able to hear my voice, Haribu?
Yeah, I can hear you. Everybody can hear me, right?
Yes, Prabhuji.
Rajnesh, you can hear, right? No, I think there's something wrong with his phone. Just text. Cyclone will just text him that we can hear him.
Not able to hear anything.
Alan again came. Alan again came rushing out of the studio. It was fine, he said. He explained that they had recorded a little echo into the speech to make it special for the listener. Now he pushed back his glasses with his finger. We have got about 10 minutes left on the side with the speech. Would you like to chant again? Or is it too late, Swamiji? Prabhupada smiled. No, it was not too late. He would chant the prayer to his spiritual master. While his disciples lounged around the studio, watching the spiritual master and the technical activity of the engineers behind the glass, Prabhupada began singing. Again, the harmonium's drone began, then the tambura and drum, but with a much smaller rhythm group than before. He sang through without any retakes, and then ended the song. And the evening with a fortissimo drumming as the hand pumped organ notes faded. Again, Alan came out and thanked Swami for being so patient and such a good studio musician. Prabhupada was sitting still sitting. Now we are tired, he admitted. Sadly, over the studio sound system came a playback of the Hare Krishna chanting, complete with echo. When Prabhupada heard the successful recording of his chanting, he became happy and stood and began dancing, swaying back and forth, dipping slightly from the waist, his arms upraised in the style of Lord Chaitanya, dancing in ecstasy. The scheduled performance was over, but now Swamiji was making the best performance of the evening from his spontaneous feelings. As he danced, his half-asleep disciples became startled and also rose to their feet and joined him, dancing in the same style. And in the recording booth behind the glass, the engineers also raised their hands and began dancing and chanting. Now you have made your best record, Swamiji told Mr. Kalman as he left the studio for the freezing Manhattan evening. Swamiji got into the front seat of the Volkswagen but bus while the Hare Krishna chanters climbed into the back with their instruments. And Rupanuga drove them back home, back to the Lower East Side. The next morning, Prabhupada didn't get up. He was exhausted. Kirtananda, who was personally serving him, became alarmed when the Swami said something about his heart skipping and about not being able to move. For the first time, it became apparent that he was exerting himself. Kirtananda thought back through the fall and summer. When the Swami had led them all on hours-long kirtans in the park or on late evening ventures. They had come to take it for granted. But now Kirtananda saw that there was cause to be worried for Swamiji's health. Swamiji had no appetite for lunch, although by afternoon he regained his appetite and usual activity. So Prabhupada was very happy. The recording went well. And now natural singing and dancing, Prabhupada ecstatically chanted, everyone joined him with this. Now everyone back home, but Prabhupada seems to be very tired, exhausted, didn't get up, and he complained about the heart issue. Kirtanand was very concerned. He remembered he could chant hours, but today it looks like he was very affected. But eventually, the same day, he feels a little better. Going on, read.
The same day, a letter arrived from Mukunda in San Francisco. Not long after the wedding, Mukunda and Janaki had left.
Oh, pause. So I was there. You read this one, Mukunda. Mukunda, when did Mukunda go to San Francisco? When I was in the kitchen, you read this one? Oh, I thought the letter arrived from Mukunda from inside. Did you all remember Mukunda Goswami going to San Francisco? Eh? I heard that Mukunda, they wanted to go for honeymoon. So Prabhupada said, okay, Prabhupada said, if you're, maybe it'll come here, I don't know.
But
yeah, he said that, while on your honeymoon, try to set up a temple in San Francisco. That's what he said. Okay, go ahead.
So the same day, a letter arrived from Mukunda in San Francisco. Not long after the wedding, Mukunda and Janaki had left for the West Coast. Mukunda had told Swamiji that he wanted to go on to India to study Indian music. But after a few weeks in Southern Oregon, he had ended up in San Francisco. Now he had a better idea. He wanted to rent a place and invite Swamiji to come and start his Hare Krishna movement in Haight-Ashbury district, just as he was doing on the Lower East Side. He said that the prospects there for Krishna consciousness was very good. On hearing this, Prabhupada began unfolding his expansive plans. They should open temples not only in San Francisco, but one by one all over the world, even in Russia and China, and print the Bhagavad Gita in different languages. And he would translate all the volumes of Srimad Bhagavatam into English and take a party of devotees back to India. The devotees who heard him were amazed. Kirtananda, who had seen the alarming symptoms of Prabhupada's ill health, began to forget what he had thought earlier that morning. If Krishna desired Kirtananda thought Swamiji could do anything.
Yeah.
When Prabhupada came down to hold his morning class on November 19th, he carried a large red book instead of the usual brown one. But no one noticed the difference. He began, as always, softly singing prayers to his spiritual master and accompanied himself with the faint rhythm on his bongo. The weather was cold, but the steam radiators kept the storefront warm. There would be no more outdoor chanting now. In Manhattan, the city opens wide in the summer and shuts tight in the winter, which for the evening classes meant no more noisy children outside the door. And although the morning classes had always been quiet even in the summer, now with the winter approaching, the group became a tighter, more committed core of sincere students coming together to hear Swami. So that same day, a letter had arrived from Mukunda and from San Francisco, where it said that Mukunda and Janaki had left for the West Coast. They had ended up in San Francisco, and he had the idea of renting a place in Heights Ashford district, and he wanted to invite Prabhupada there so he could start his Krishna consciousness movement there. And then Prabhupada also started thinking about and unfolding his plans of that there should be a temple all over the world. And Kirtananda always was watching how Prabhupada's health was going down, but he saw that if Krishna desired Swamiji, Prabhupada could do anything. So the next morning, Prabhupada came down to hold his morning classes, and instead of carrying his usual brown one, he was carrying a large red book, but no one had noticed, and they kept on going. And he just talked about how the weather was cold, so the circumstances and situations have changed, and that now more committed and sincere students will be coming to hear Prabhupada speak.
So here, Shyam Sundar Prabhu writes a very elaborate, the volume 1, changing the rhinos. Right, this the section is the whole elaborate comes into the first section. At least half of the first section we can say elaborately. How did he Mukunda got Shyam Sundar Prabhu and Malati Mataji. So I suggest you all will relish now after reading this. Okay, who is supposed to read? We still have some time. Vijayan Prabhu, you can read.
It was now 4 months since he had begun ISKCON at 26 Second Avenue. He had held 3 separate initiations and initiated 19 devotees. Most of them had become serious, although a few remained casual visitors. Now, in these morning classes, Swamiji wanted to instruct them more about how to become devotees. He led the chanting of Hare Krishna for 20 minutes, cautioning them to respond softly, so that the neighbors would not pour water through the ceiling again. Although they had not done it lately, Prabhupada always tried to cooperate with the tenants. But occasionally, someone would start a petition which never amounted to much against the devotees. Sometimes, Prabhupada would help the landlord, Mr. Chatti, by taking out other tenants' garbage or just giving him a hand. Mr. Chotte was a husky, beer-bellied Polish refugee who lived alone in an apartment on the first floor. Mr. Chotte respected the Swami for his age and scholarship, and Swamiji was always amiable with him. Mr. Chotte was a husky, beer-bellied Polish refugee who lived alone in an apartment on the first floor. Mr. Chotte respected the Swami for his age and scholarship, and Swamiji was always amiable with him. Whenever Mr. Chotte came to the apartment, he would never take his shoes off, and Prabhupada would always say, "That's all right, that's all right." And one time, when the plumbing did not work in Prabhupada's apartment, Prabhupada went downstairs and took a shower in Mr. Chotte's apartment. But Swamiji also considered Mr. Chotte as a classic example of a foolish materialist because although he had spent his life saving to buy this building, he still had to work so hard. Swamiji said he was a fool for having spent his savings to buy such a rundown building, but the building was in such a poor condition. Because the building was in such a poor condition, he had to work like an ass to keep it up. This is how the materialist work, Swamiji would say. So so in the past 4 months, it has been 4 months since Prabhupada started ISKCON at the 26th 2nd Avenue. So in this time, he had like 3 separate initiations where he had initiated 19 devotees. And out of them, like most of them are serious, following them seriously, but few remain casual visitors. And he, in the morning classes, Swamiji wanted to tell them like how to become devotees. And he was leading the Hare Krishna chanting for like 20 minutes, asking them to respond softly, otherwise the neighbors may pour water through the ceiling. And lately they did like that. And also Prabhupada tried to cooperate with the tenants by and occasionally someone would start a petition and against the devotees. And Prabhupada would help the landlord, Mr. Chute, by taking the other tenants' garbage or just giving him a hand. So there is a description about his landlord also. Mr. Chute was like a beer-bellied Polish refugee who lived who alone in an apartment in the first floor. And he respected Swamiji for his age and scholarship. And when Mr. Chute came to his apartment, he would never take his shoes off, and Prabhupada would always say, "That's all right, that's all right." And like once when the plumbing did not work in Prabhupada's apartment, Prabhupada went downstairs and took shower in his landlord's apartment. And Prabhupada thought that considered Mr. Chute as a classic example of a foolish materialist, because he had spent all his life savings to buy the building, and he's working very hard. And he thought like he was a fool, spending his savings to buy such a rundown building, because that building was in a poor condition, and he has to work like an ass to keep it up. And he was saying like, this is how the materialist will work.
Today we had a low participation. I hope everything is okay. Nice, but I enjoyed a lot. Prasanta, did you read again? Cycle, did I ask you to read again? I forgot.
Yes, Prabhu, we all read 2 times.
Okay, I can read once again. Mr. Chat, all the respectful to the Swami didn't like the devotees. Prabhupada told his disciples, treat him as if he were your father. So that's what they did. Anytime they would leave they have to deal with Mr. Chate, they would approach him saying, "We are your sons." Those disciples who lived at the storefront had risen by 6:30, bathed and assembled downstairs by 7, while those who lived outside were arriving separately, taking off their coats and piling them on the shelf of the display window. Although women always attended the evening meetings, Yadurani was usually the only girl who came in the morning. After breakfast, she would begin painting upstairs in the Swami's front room. She used a beginner's technique of dividing the canvas into vertical and horizontal grid lines and transposing bit by bit the corresponding sections of a photograph into the canvas. The process was painstaking, and sometimes her painting was out of proportion. But Jadurani was sincere, and that pleased Prabhupada. She had completed several paintings of 4-armed Vishnu, a new painting of Radha Krishna, and a painting of Lord Chaitanya and his associates. When the painting of Lord Chaitanya was finished, Swamiji had it hung in the temple. Now he announced, there should be no more nonsense here. Lord Chaitanya is present. So after the morning kirtan, Swami said, as usual, now chant one round. They chanted together, following him. They all had a vow to chant 16 rounds daily, but they chanted the first round in the morning in the Swami's presence. So he could see each of them. As Swamiji chanted, he looked out at Second Avenue, which is mostly deserted, or at the pictures on the wall, or with concerned glances at the individual devotees. Sometimes he seemed surprised when he saw them chanting so earnestly, giving evidence of the power of the holy name to deliver even the most fallen. Some of the devotees kept their beads in a bead bag like his, but when they chanted the first round together in the morning, they imitated him by holding their beads out in hand in both hands and chanting along with him, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, until they finished one round. Then he held up the unfamiliar red book. Because you are a little advanced, he said, I'm going to read today from the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Chaitanya what? No one was able to pick up the pronunciation. They had heard of Chaitanya, certainly, but not of this new book. But in his room, the night before, Prabhupada had informed some of the devotees that he would start reading from a new book, Chaitanya Charitamrita. He said that Lord Chaitanya had told one of his disciples that understanding Krishna wasn't really possible, but that he would give the disciple just a drop of an ocean of Krishna consciousness, so that the disciples could then appreciate what the whole ocean must be like. Be patient. Be patient as I present this, he had told them. It is revolutionary, but you should just be patient. Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita ki jai. So now the miracles are happening. What? Prabhupada now focusing on training more seriously to devotees. Basically, he wanted to train them. So devotees used to get ready by 6:30 or by 7. Everyone used to be ready. Those who were living, and Jadurani also used to join. Some other people also used to join. Jadurani painted many. When he finished the Lord Chaitanya's painting, and Prabhupada hung it in the temple. He said that now everyone should be very careful. Now Lord Chaitanya is here. And then they would chant one round in the morning with Prabhupada. And now Prabhupada is opening up first time a red book, Chaitanya Charitamrita. He said that is because of the Lord Chaitanya, actually, we are able to understand little Krishna. That it is not possible to understand Krishna, but Chaitanya Mahaprabhu gave a little drop of his mercy. Ocean of Krishna consciousness, the disciple could then appreciate what the whole ocean must be like. So be patient as I present this. So it is revolutionary, but you should just be patient. So with this we will finish tonight. I find it very, very inspiring, but at least we see that the building is not confirmed yet. And at least Prabhupada had a nice recordings. Mukunda sent a nice inspiring message. Heights, Asbury to open a center there. Prabhupada has the plans to open all over the world. I think Mukunda Maharaj is an instrumental to open many. That's it. Many things we did. What else we studied today? So, Back to Godhead. He asked the Back to Godhead magazine to be printed every month to Hagriva Prabhu. So I want to thank you for all for joining. we can end it here. Okay. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita ki jai. Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.